The Invisible Employee. Realizing the Hidden Potential in Everyone. By Adrian Gostick and Chester Elton. Narrated by Alan Sklar. Copyright 2006 by O.C. Tantor Company. This unabridged audiobook is published by arrangement with Adrian Gostick, Chester Elton, and John Wiley & Sons, and was produced in the year 2006 by Tantor Media, Incorporated, which holds the copyright thereto. Introduction. One of my, Adrian's, favorite photographs of my parents was taken in the 1950s. My dad is on a ramshackle Norton 500 motorbike, and my mother is seated next to him in a sidecar. On her lap is their border collie, Puccini. On the pillion behind my father is strapped a bulky canvas tent and a suitcase. They were taking a vacation before the kids arrived, camping on the English coast. A quick escape from my dad's job at Rolls-Royce, riding in their first, rather modest vehicle. When I saw the photo a few years ago, I smiled and teased my dad. "They didn't pay you very well at Rolls, did they?" He chuckled and told me the story of joining Rolls-Royce in Derby, England, as a very young draftsman of jet airplane components. He agreed that the company never did pay exorbitant wages. In fact, 25 years later, he would finally leave England for Canada and triple his salary. And while he did receive numerous promotions along the way, I'm also afraid Rolls-Royce couldn't offer Gordon Gostick growth into senior leadership, since there was a bottleneck of older talent ahead of him. Still, he did stay there more than 2 decades. Why? My dad explained. "You know, I enjoyed every day. You weren't just a number going to work at Royce's. Managers actually talked to you and listened to what you had to say. When we identified a problem coming up in taking an engine concept to manufacturing, those above you in your department, and in other departments, would accept the knowledge you'd built up in your certain area, and they'd modify the design to improve the final engine. Everybody had their input. When asked what happened when an improvement idea came from him, he said simply, 'My name was on the drawing.' What a simple formula. When he spoke, someone listened. When he did something remarkable that furthered the company's progress, his name was on the drawing that went up to management, and that meant that every day he actually enjoyed going into work. Now that is a big deal. Wouldn't it be great if your company was filled with employees like Gordon Gostick, people who were excited to go into work? Not full of employees who mumble a sad prayer on the train, 'Dear Lord, please strike me down before I get there.' Or worse yet, 'Please bless that my boss died over the weekend in a freak gardening accident.' In his book, Achieving Total Quality, Wayne H. Brunetti writes that the greatest reward you can offer employees is actually listening to their ideas and acknowledging their contribution. The most important thing to keep in mind is that employees want management to implement the team's solution if the solution solves the problem. This is the highest form of recognition. Credit must be given when credit is due. Now, as you know, not everyone is missing the boat on this. There are some great companies to work for. There is a reason people will wait for months and months just to get an interview with Southwest Airlines. In fact, it's more competitive to get hired by Southwest Airlines for $10 an hour as a baggage handler than to be accepted into the Harvard School of Business. Only 4% of the 90,000 people who apply for work at Southwest each year are actually hired. Now that is unbelievable. Can you imagine your kid coming to you after high school saying, "Mom, Dad, I think I know what I want to do with my life. I want to be a gate attendant for Southwest." And you are forced to crush the dream. "Whoa there, Junior, you may be setting your sights too high. Why don't you apply to Harvard instead?" That's the power of an affirming culture. It is rare, and people will stand in line to work there. In the interim, most of us settle for places like those described by a study quoted in the New York Times, where 50% call their place of work a place of verbal abuse and yelling. 30% are regularly given unrealistic deadlines. 52% have to work 12-hour days to get the work done. 1 in 12 complain their chair hurts their posterior. The sad thing is, most leaders of people have no idea about the unhealthy state of their workplaces. They have a pretty darn clear idea what their bosses want. They know quite a bit about their customers and their needs. They can recite by heart their product lists. But what do they really know about the needs of the people who actually get the work done for them? Not so much. And why is that important? Because quite simply, employees work harder for people who care about them as individuals. Don't you? Think about it for a moment. Whom do you work harder to please? The boss who is aloof and inattentive, focused on furthering his career? Or the leader who is actively interested in your work achievements and asks about your kids and your weekend fishing passion? The old adage, "I don't care if they like me as long as they respect me," is not only wrong, it's dangerous in the modern workplace. And it's a leadership attitude that's causing more than a few problems with our workforce. One problem is called presenteeism. Now, absenteeism is easy to spot, but presenteeism describes workers who show up every day, but who really aren't there. They are present, but are limited by physical or mental issues, obsessed with problems at home, or most often overly concerned with the on-the-job difficulties. Too many of these folks are burned out, stressed, underutilized, or simply ignored by their leaders. The Harvard Business Review estimates presenteeism costs American businesses $150 billion annually in direct and indirect costs. Here's more sobering news about our managerial effectiveness. According to several recent studies, as much as 30% of the average workforce is actively disengaged. That means up to 3 out of 10 people in your workplace are not only uncaring about their jobs, the quality of their work, or giving you their best ideas and energy, but are actively recruiting others to join them in their discontent. And the word on the street is that it's not going to get better anytime soon. According to a 2003 survey, 90% of workers say they want their leaders to notice their efforts and improve their recognition and rewards before they will feel committed to their organizations. In short, we could write a book about the epidemic of invisible employees and the chaos they leave in their wake. And actually, we have. We began this book a few years ago, after the release of our Carrot series of business books. Many of those who read the books asked us to speak in their organizations, and we found ourselves meeting leaders and line managers from a variety of industries in countries around the world. At first blush, every single one of the managers we met looked great. They all wore spiffy professional clothes, had the right vocabulary and flawless posture, and knew their industries and its jargon. But the real revelation of their competence came when we spoke to the employees working for them. For the most part, the people who worked for great bosses were confident and outgoing. They seemed to be able to do anything and weren't afraid of change or competition. These employees seemed to revel in giving their best work and best ideas to further the goals of the organization. But we also met a group of employees who were very different. Some of these folks were quieter and more reserved. Others were obsessed with frightening market conditions that threatened their futures. In the worst cases, some were openly contemptuous. They complained about their needy customers, their co-workers, and especially their bosses. These employees worked for lousy bosses, and they spent their days quietly undermining the efforts of their teams, managers, and companies. Some were actively cynical. Why? Because they lived in the shadows, rarely noticed. They were invisible. We wish we could say we didn't understand how they felt, but personally, we've worked for good managers and some lousy managers ourselves, and the difference is dramatic. So when we thought of all the people suffering through pitiful bosses in this world, and of all the...
Sample complete. Ready to continue?